betting in California is going to be something that's going to be talked about here for the next 10 months until the election. So as you guys know, in November of 2022, we have the midterm elections here around the country. So not just in California, but all 50 states are going to be voting for new representatives in the House, and not only new representatives, but new senators as well. For some people in California, we're voting for the governor, and, other elected offices here in the state. All the state assembly seats are also up. So a lot of stuff. And of course, with midterm elections comes propositions as well, particularly these big propositions. And there's actually quite a few propositions that are going to be on the California ballot that are very big and very important. And frankly, one of the propositions that I believe is going to be really important is the one we're going to talk about right here: sports betting in California. So listen, a lot of states, actually 30 states around the country, have legalized sports betting. And this is a market, as you guys know, with, the rise of companies like FanDuel and Barstool and all of these companies. Sports betting is absolutely exploding throughout the United States. It is exploding. And listen, football season ended, but that doesn't stop the betting world from continuing on. The NBA is still going. The MLB is going to start up here in a few months. Sports doesn't stop in this country, and that means sports betting will not stop. And I believe, and honestly, though, the rise of online sports betting and daily fantasy and all of these things is really creating this new market share for business. And so the main companies that are involved within sports betting, at least across the nation where it's legalized, are companies like FanDuel, DraftKings. These are companies you probably have heard. DraftKings was traded on the New York Times, or not the New York Times, the New York Stock Exchange, and a company called Barstool Sports, which has recently got in with their own sports book. So yeah, that's happening. And listen, the sports betting economy is absolutely blowing up. But the thing is, where do a lot of people in America live? California and New York, right? Those are two. California, New York, and Texas are probably the three most populous states in the country. Two of the three have legalized. The one that hasn't legalized sports betting yet is California, the state that I live in. And California has a huge market share because there's a lot of consumers. There's like 9 major sports teams here. And so when you get California, and if the big sports betting companies can get California, based on legislation and a lot of stuff has to happen, then you're looking at a huge increase in the business. But look, not going to be that easy for any of these big companies, because let me explain it real quick. The way California works with betting and gambling is that a lot of it comes down to legal casino operators. So California's gambling system runs through the Native American reservation system. And so a lot of the way that Native Americans and the reservations get their income is through casinos. And that's why you hear, like, in California, like, oh, if you want to go gamble, go to an Indian reservation, because that's where a lot of the gambling does take place. So these legal casino operators and card rooms and sort of traditional in-person casinos on these Indian reservations are forced to basically duke it out with these big companies like FanDuel that are pouring in mass amounts of money to get their initiatives on the ballot, in order to, with sports betting and all of the stuff that's going to go on. But I mean, like I said, if California sports betting does go through, you're adding like close to $3 billion of betting. Like, it's crazy. $3 billion. That's a lot of money. And, it's going to come down to the little guy, which is the Native Americans, versus big sporting book companies like Caesars Sportsbook, FanDuel Sportsbook, Barstool, all of these different companies. And it's going to be a big war. So it's going to be a big fight. So let's talk about kind of what's going on with this fight. So right now in California, there are 3 potential proposals that are going to be on the ballot come November. Okay. So 3 potential proposals that are going to probably happen. So let me go through all 3, and then I'll tell you what I think of all of these various 3. Okay. So the first proposal, and they all have really long legal names. So apologies for, me going into this fucking jargon that's all over the place. So the first proposal is called the California Sports Wagering Regulation and Unlawful Gambling Enforcement Act. AKA, this act is basically being proposed by the Native Americans and the legal casino operators here in California. What they're saying and it's backed up by a bunch of Native American tribes and, that coalitions and whatnot. And basically what it says is that basically what they want and what it says is that the only sports betting that you can do is in person at casinos and at the 4 horse racing tracks in California. So there's like 4 horse racing tracks. You can legally bet there, and you can legally sports bet in a casino as well. So basically all the online sports books, FanDuel, Barstool, are obviously like, fuck no, like I don't want this. All the big companies are against it and all of that. But here's the issue. Like I said earlier, like gambling in the state of California has traditionally been not dominated by Native Americans, and it is one of the only ways that they get money into their reservations. And so if you take this completely away, which is, typically what the big companies want to do, you're losing a lot of jobs. Native Americans could get screwed over once again in history, and it could be a lot more harmful than it appears on the surface. Okay, then you have the second proposal, which is called the California Solutions to Homeless and Mental Health Support Act. This is the act that has been supported by a lot of the big sportsbook companies, the Barstools, the FanDuels of the world, all of that, as well as several mayors around California. So basically what this act is going to allow is it's going to allow online sports books to infiltrate California in the sports betting market. But with the pledge, there has to be a pledge that 10% of the money has to go to ending homelessness and helping with mental health resources. So this sounds great on the surface. Sounds fucking fantastic. But this is the state government we're talking about. Gavin Newsom, when he ran back in 2018, preached the same exact thing, that he was going to do everything in his power to end homelessness and really work hard to combat against the problems. But here we are in 2022, and that has not been the case. Homelessness has gone up in California. We've seen a lot of various things happen that Gavin Newsom said he was going to try and prevent. Okay, I'm just keeping those disclaimers in place. That is a fact. Gavin Newsom, the homelessness has decreased here in California, increased in California, whether you like that or not. Also partially due to the COVID pandemic, not all because of Gavin Newsom. I'm just going to put that out there. But I feel like I have seen propositions as well during Newsom's tenure that have been put into place with aiding mental health and homelessness, but I've yet to see this actual action and actual data backing up that these propositions and these grants and all of these things that are going into that have passed in, from the public have gone into action. I haven't seen a lot of that happen. So it's kind of weird, to be honest. In addition, I feel like like the people that support this second proposal are the big brands, the FanDuels of the world, the DraftKings, the Barstools. So really the bigger companies that are trying to come in and get that California lion's share. Obviously, the Native Americans do not support this act because that would mean all betting is online at that point, or all betting is pretty much online and wouldn't necessarily be, in the casinos, lose a lot of people, a lot of jobs, stuff like that. This proposal, however, the first proposal we talked about is officially going to be on the ballot in 2022. The second proposal is not officially on the ballot. It does not have enough signatures, but it's been hitting a lot of the early landmarks that it needs to be hitting to get to where it needs to be in terms of its in terms of it being on the actual ballot in November. It's been getting the signatures it needs. It's hit early landmarks. And basically, it's got to be signed by, I believe it is June 30th of this year. It's got to have, I believe, 1 million signatures for it to officially be on the ballot. And it's looking like it's probably going to be on the ballot. And then the third proposal, which most likely will not be on the ballot, but is worth talking about because it's actually, in my opinion, the best proposal, is the age-verified tribal online and in-person sports wagering act. So basically, this act allows for both online sports books and tribes to operate gambling. So it wouldn't necessarily cost jobs, even though, when you do bring in the online presence, it would cost a significant number of jobs, no matter what, in regards to traditional casino rooms and all of that. But this proposal has no support. The big companies don't want to, spend their time compromising with the Native Americans, and the Native American tribal groups don't want the big companies and don't want to compromise with the big companies. So basically, it's got hardly any signatures. There's not really any credible individuals that are backing this bill. even though there is a particular coalition of Native Americans that are supporting this bill and trying to compromise, but the bill itself has really no legs yet, and probably will not make the ballot in November. But I also took a chance and took a shot at reading the bill. I skimmed all three, but this is the one I really tried to read in depth. The language is super broad. I feel like there isn't really any concrete details as to how this is going to go into place, but so I could see why there is limited support, because I feel like the proposition is quite poorly written. At the end of the day. So there are three proposals. These are the three that you probably need to know, because these are the three that have the biggest chance of making it to the ballot. Proposal 1 is already guaranteed to be on the ballot. Proposal 2 will most likely be there as well. And maybe proposal 3 will make an appearance. So like, what are we supposed to take from these three proposals, right? Fair question. Okay. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to this. Who wins? Big business or Native Americans, right? It's the little guy versus the big guy. And I don't mean to portray it in this light where I'm saying that like Native Americans are the little guy in this case, right? And like putting Native Americans behind anything automatically freaks out half the population. But as someone who's a sports bettor, because I feel like I have a pretty nuanced perspective on this, because I do understand the other side, but I understand the big business as well. As someone who's a sports bettor, I really like how easy FanDuel is to use, and it gets people who probably wouldn't bet sports to get involved and participate in it, which I think is cool. But at the same time, I do understand that the Native people's professions are kind of being thrown to the side, and we're not really recognizing the fact that we're probably taking jobs from them. But also, like, no one, like, right now in the state of California, you could place bets in Indian casinos. But the fact is, there's not very many Indian casinos in most areas. Like, even if you live in LA or San Francisco, like, you have to travel hours outside of your major metropolitan city to go place bets, which, let's be real, not very many people are going to do. So I think it's not the most realistic proposal to put into place, even though a lot of jobs are going to be lost. That being said, like, I do believe that proposal 2 is a good sort of proposal. I think the one that supports big business, and I think this because I think the money is going to 10% of the money is going to go to homelessness and mental health, and I like to give the state government the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully it does actually go into enact some change. And I would just like to see how those resources will be allocated and how the programs are exactly laid out. But small business is going to get laid out, with the traditional gambling rooms and all of this, if FanDuel and Barstool went out here with proposal 2. And that's kind of the sad part of it all, is that there is going to be some jobs lost. And I would like to see maybe proposal 2 incorporate an element of like putting sort of, what do you call it? Like putting some money aside for the Native Americans and like putting it back, reinvesting it back into the reservations in which it's like taking the money from. I think that could be more beneficial. But we'll see how it all shakes out at the end. But really what this battle is going to come down to here is money. It's going to come down to money, and it's going to come down to who has more resources, who is willing to fight this fight harder. Are the big companies do the big companies want California that bad? Which the answer is yes, because the market is huge. And how can the Native Americans find a way to come to maybe an agreement with the big companies to come to a proposal that maybe works out for the both of them? We'll see. It's a really interesting proposal. It's a really interesting battle that's going on between these two sort of groups that are duking it out for the rights to sports betting in this state. Right now, I believe sports betting is mostly illegal. You have to do it through bookies and whatnot. But we will see come 2022, voters are going to have the option to make FanDuel and Barstool legal in this state, which it could be huge. And that could be very, very interesting. Very, very quickly.